"27 reasons to miss church." This week, as we get into a little bit of a discussion, it comes from a question of what is a good, wholesome reason to miss church? And part of this comes from after 20 years of, next month, it's going to be my 20-year anniversary of going to church or walking with Jesus. It's a 20-year anniversary from my baptism date. And as I reflect, I've been reflecting on my time. I'm reflecting on different questions. One question that comes up from time to time is the idea of missing church. And along my journey, I've been in a church culture that's shifted even how often we've met. I mean, there was a time period where I was going to church on Sundays, and then on a Tuesday night, and then on a Wednesday night, and then on a Friday, and then maybe there was a Saturday event, and then sometimes there was even a Sunday, and sometimes it was 4 to 5 meetings a week. Sometimes more recently, it hasn't been as meeting intensive as it's been in years past, but there's still been this commitment to going to church. So if you take 20 years and you multiply it by the number of potential services, I think you get around 1,000 services if we're just talking about Sundays. And you get 2,000 if you're talking about Wednesdays. And if you have like a small group meeting that's once a week or once every other week, then we're talking 2,500 meetings. So no small deal. It's 2,500 meetings. And so I've had a number of conversations about times when I've missed. The 27 reasons I'm going to list out are either reasons I've missed or advice that I gave for other people when they come to me about them missing, or advice I would give today if somebody had asked me about their situation or circumstance, and when I would advise somebody to potentially miss church. So why don't we jump into the reasons, and we'll fly through these 27 reasons, and then I'll have a few thoughts to come back to you. But actually, before we jump into the reasons, I do want us to read a verse together. And that verse comes from a text that people often use when talking about the importance of church attendance, and it comes from the book of Hebrews. And let's go to look at that together. It's Hebrews chapter 10, and we're going to look at it in verse, we're going to read 25 through 24 and 25. It says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward loving good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So the idea of what this passage puts forward is to not give up meeting together. Now, it doesn't take an advanced linguist to understand to not give up meeting together is vastly different from missing one singular local church service. Those are different things. So it would be like, okay, well, if you haven't gone for a day, have you given up? If you haven't gone for a week, if you haven't gone for 2 weeks, have you given up meeting together? I think a linguist would understand a basic common knowledge. We'd understand that just because someone hasn't been for 2 weeks doesn't mean they've stopped meeting together. Plus, many of us during COVID knew exactly what it was like to not meet with one another. At least in person, we were meeting with each other virtually for sure. But all that to say is, let's not get it twisted and make a verse say something that it doesn't say, because that one verse does say, hey, don't stop meeting together. Don't give it up entirely. Make it a part of who you are and what you are. Now being mindful that what that verse doesn't, let's not stretch that verse to say that doesn't stretch into saying it has to be every day or it has to be every week, although daily is good. Hebrews chapter 3 earlier in that same book, 7 chapters before the chapter 10 passage we just looked at, does say daily, this daily focus on encouraging other people, then other believers even. But so as we begin to think through and unwind this, I want you to think through why you believe what you believe in terms of church attendance. Church attendance is a beautiful thing. Let's say in a lot of the reasons we're going to get through, maybe church attendance is a rating of a 10 out of 10, as far as things you can do. And sometimes you'll hear a preacher say something like, okay, if you see somebody on the side of the road, seek first the kingdom by going over in and helping out the person on the side of the road instead of going to church. But then sometimes you don't get all the other reasons and potentialities of why someone could or should miss church. And then sometimes people end up feeling oddly guilty for different things that come up. So let's go ahead and pop through these reasons. Let's just fly through them. I'm going to give examples that I've been in, other people have been in, people that have been around me have been in, and then even advice that I've given to people all along the way. Reason number 1, caring for a sick family member. So when you think about this passage, and the scripture tells us in Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the sheep and the goats, and one of the 6 things Jesus, again, he made this a salvation issue. He made it an issue where caring for the sick was actually you caring for Jesus. Caring for the least of these was actually you caring for Jesus. So I've known people who have had sick children and they've missed church. And I don't think that's, I think, again, it doesn't take very long for you to think through how that's good, wholesome, and appropriate. A parent will often stay home, especially in the era of COVID, will stay home with the child. One of the parents, if there's a 2-parent household, will stay home caring for the child. If there's a 1-parent household, that parent will stay home caring for the kid, a family member. That's, again, this isn't like, again, a stretch of imagination. It's living out your faith. Probably even more uncomfortable to stay home and to take care of a sick family member than to go to church in that setting. Let's go. Reason number 2, visiting someone in prison. Back to Matthew chapter 25, in the parable of the sheep and the goats. He lists 6 different reasons of, hey, I was hungry, to the goats, he says, I was hungry, you didn't give me food. I was thirsty, you didn't give me drink. I was naked, you didn't give me clothes. I was a stranger, you didn't invite me in. I was sick, you didn't look after me. And number 6, he said, I was in prison, and you didn't visit me. And he makes it, hey, you didn't take care of the least of these, you didn't take care of me. So this is one where I years back, I was invited when I was doing a lot more things in prison as a volunteer. I was invited to preach every so often for a Sunday. But even then, I think my mindset, I hadn't opened myself up to the possibility that going to prison to preach to those guys is just as valuable, just as precious. Again, if we said a church service is a 10, then going to visit those in prison and preach in prison, why wouldn't that also be a 10? And I hadn't really come to that revelation yet, but if I could go back and tell that younger me about the insight, I would have said, hey, like, that's no better. It's no worse than going to church. When you go to church, I mean, you're able to live out a bunch of passages. You're able to get the greeting with one another by name, like maybe like 3 John says. You're able to get some singing in, like the Psalms say, to sing to our King. Like I think it's a Psalm 47 that talks about we sing praises to our King. You can go look that one up. But the number of verses that talks about singing, you go live this singing passage up. If you see somebody you know, you might give them a special a greeting of affection. You might encourage them with kind words, and you might hear a good message being preached. So you're part of all of those, living out those scriptures in a church service. And if you were to go to prison and visit somebody, you're also living out the scripture in Matthew 25, the parable of the sheep and the goat. So that's just reason number 2. Let's keep going. Visiting a family member in the hospital. Again, we talked about those who are sick or those who are ill. My sister had given birth, and one, if you were the person who gave birth and you happen to be on a Sunday morning, again, it's reasonable, completely okay and right for someone in that setting to miss church service. Now, when my sister had given birth, and then there was a couple of days, and when we were going to take food over to her, Again, like taking food to somebody who had just given birth in the hospital, when you begin to evaluate, isn't this like Jesus? Isn't it like him to take care of the sick, to provide food to somebody who's hungry, to go out of your way to use your resources to lift somebody else up? Listen, again, we're talking just basic concepts. Let's keep it moving. Reason number 4. If you were in the hospital, let's say you were injured, and you're in the hospital. When I was younger, I remember when I was in the college ministry, and I remember it was like a Tuesday. It was like it was like a small group Bible study day, and one of the women in our group, she had been running that morning, and she had got hit by a car, and then that evening, she shows up limping to our small group Bible study. Again, she had just got hit by a car. And which, when we were younger, we were like, that's amazing. You know, we were like celebrating and saying like her zeal, her passion, she was all in, she was committed. You know, I think that was, again, we were like, what I would say, we were young and dumb. But as a 37-year-old, reflecting backward, going like, I don't know if that was the move. I don't know if I should have been celebrating that as opposed to saying, hey, like, sis, like, hey, don't stay home, get rest, recover, heal on up. Like, truly don't come. And I've wondered since then, like, how did that look to her family, right? Like, did it look as though like she felt that she was obligated and forced and coerced and manipulated to have to show up, even though she had got hit by a car that day? So as a 37-year-old, I see it different than a 21-year-old sees it. It's a different view, a different perspective. So what I would say to her, if I could go back to the 21-year-old me, or if I could talk to her, you know, again, all those years ago, whatever, 15, 16 years ago, I would say, look, like, I know you're zealous. I know you're passionate. I know you have a heart for God. I know you have a heart to meet with people. But this is one of those times where you glorify God by taking care of your body, recovering at home, resting. That's the way you glorify God. And again, this is a reasonable take. This isn't like this isn't far-fetched. This is a reasonable person who knows somebody who got hit by a vehicle would advise them to stay home. Your act of worship is staying home and recovering. It's just appropriate. All right, let's move to our next one. Honoring your mother. You could also substitute your father, like on a special day. Honoring your father and mother on a special day. This is one where, you know, I've reflected on sometimes, and so here's a conversation I had behind the scenes that I don't know if I've ever told before. Is one of my friends on Mother's Day, he had shared with me, you know, his mom goes to a Catholic church, and at the time, this individual was coming to church with me, and on Mother's Day, naturally he invited her to come to the church with us, but his mom would go to a Catholic church, and so on Mother's Day, I think she had teased him and said, "Hey, like you're gonna go," and I think he knew my mom was gonna come to church with me, and so she had teased him about this idea. Oh, you're gonna go, celebrate or honor the other people's moms that you go to church with. And I think it was a joke. It was a tease. It wasn't anything serious, but I did reflect on that and I've asked myself, was it the best move to have him at church with us as opposed to going to the Catholic church? Yeah, I don't agree with everything that happens in the Catholic church, but was that actually the best move? And I sit today and go, if I could speak to the younger me who could speak to that friend. I'd say, hey, this is Sunday. Yeah, invite your mom to see if she wants to come. If she doesn't, why don't you go ahead and go with her to the Catholic Church? It's it's Mother's Day, and I know Mother's Day is not like in the Bible, but it's one way we live out the scriptures. It's one way our society happens to honor that which God says to honor, which is our mothers. And you go celebrate with her. Go celebrate her with her. Go spend the day with her. She gave you birth. And again, when my younger sister who gave birth just a couple of weeks back, I was actually able to be in the room during the birth, which is, again, this total, absolute respect to all the mamas, because my goodness, yeah, it was an experience for sure. But I think about what happens. Oh, what if your mom's birthday falls on a Sunday, and your family's doing a service, a special breakfast for her? What do? Right? Do you sense a weird wrestling match? Oh, like I gotta, or I have to, or I should be there on Sunday, or is it, hey, maybe the way you glorify God is you show up to that breakfast for your mom and you be the biggest encourager, you be the biggest servant, you go represent Jesus at that breakfast. What about that? Why not that? What's the holdup? What's the hesitation for you just showing up? Go be Jesus to the people. You're trying to reach out to your family members anyway. Go serve them. Jesus said the greatest among you will be the one who serves. If you're not there, you can't serve at all. You're serving other people. Maybe you think about how you can honor your mother or your father on special days like this. All right. Reason number 6, seeking and saving the lost. We don't even gotta. Well, we know Luke chapter 19, seeking and saving the lost. Why do I bring this up? Because I remember there was a Wednesday church service, and I was planning on going to, and then I had a friend of mine who was in prison, and he had got out of prison, and we got into the scriptures together, and he ultimately had decided to be baptized. So there was a whole thing where I had to go get a truck, and then I got the baptismal the horse trough. I put it in the back of the truck. I filled it up with water. I put a tarp over it so the water wouldn't stay splashing out. And I drove over to the place where we had church service. But he wanted to get baptized. He wanted to get baptized. He wanted to have the conversation, make the decision. He wanted his sins to be forgiven. And so we were having the conversation, counting the cost, and asking him, how he was doing, what he was thinking, to helping him process his commitment. And so we had that conversation. So again, you're thinking about a Wednesday. We have church typically at a 7:30 p.m. So 7:30 comes and we're still having the conversation. 7:45 comes and we're still having the conversation. We're talking, listening. 8 o'clock comes and he's going, look, I said, hey, do you want to wait for after the church service? Again, which is probably 30 more minutes. He's like, no, I don't. Why would I want to wait to be with Jesus? I want to get baptized now. Like, I want to get in that water. So again, we end up, baptizing him again right in the middle of church service, where church is going on in the building, and we're having the conversation at the truck as we're, we're talking, we're praying, and ultimately baptizing him. But this all happened during the church service. So we technically missed the church service as we were preparing and helping him to be baptized. So seeking and saving the lost. And again, I told people about this afterward. It wasn't like in all of these situations and circumstances, I've had conversations with leaders, people who have led churches, people who are on the ministry staff, people who are in positions like that, and also walking through that. So again, I missed church that one Wednesday, but I missed it because I was helping somebody get baptized. And you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. If church is if that midweek service was a 10 on a 1 out of 10 rating, and helping somebody get baptized is at least a 10, maybe an 11 or 12 and a 1 out of 10 rating, then that's a good and godly thing to spend your time doing. All right. Next one, seeking and saving the lost. And I'm going to call this adjacent. This is reason number 7. Seeking and saving the lost adjacent. And what I mean by this one is seeking and saving the lost adjacent means you're doing that which leads to seeking and saving the lost. So sometimes at church service, this is maybe you'll hear ideas of, hey, how you can help more people to know Jesus, how you can have an opportunity to present Jesus to people. Well, it'll actually have an impact, where it'll actually make a difference. So one thing that I've taught openly when it comes to seeking and saving the lost, maybe you find a way to serve people in the community. Maybe before you even tell them about Jesus, before you invite them into your life, before you invite them into your church world, maybe you spend time serving them first. Now, how do you do that? In which ways are you showing up to serve the community? So when I say seeking and saving the lost adjacent, maybe that means you go serve in the community. And again, it's something I've had conversation with folks on staff, and I've had conversation with people about repurposing maybe a Wednesday church service so we can go serve the people, so we can better seek and save the lost, so we can better serve them, so we can better save them, so we can better help them. So seeking and saving. So again, thus far we're talking about doing good and godly things with that window of time. That's also appropriate. So right now, I even have my gear on. I have my Giants, shirt on. We have a game later today. So I coach a team. So that's where I'm connecting with parents in the community. I coach a team, serving the kids. I show up to practice. I show up to games, giving the high fives, giving the kids encouragement, giving the kids direction. This is all service. So serving the community. What happens if there's a practice, or even what if there's a game on a midweek night? Again, well, what rating, if we're talking about a rating system, I think it's arbitrary, but I'm bringing it in for the sake of conversation. What rating would you give a midweek service? I'd say, let's give it a 10. But then serving in the community, helping the kids with their development, showing the kindness of Jesus, giving them direction, giving them encouragement, being a positive male role model, which is always needed in every community. Is that not a 10 as well? I would say that's a 10 as well, especially when it's with the ambition of seeking and saving the lost. Does that mean I'm presenting Jesus every single practice or every single game? No. But the hope and the idea is with time, I will be, and I have, but I'll continue to give parents, I'll continue to give people on the team an opportunity to get into the Word together, whether that's family members and households like they did in the book of Acts, or if it's individuals, whatever opportunity shows up, whatever door God opens. But seeking to save and lost adjacent is this one. Let's go to the next one. Facilitating a smaller, special service. Many of the Christians that I know where there's like an early afternoon wedding on a Sunday. What I did, for example, on my wedding was on a Sunday. We were married over 10 years ago, and we had a special communion service with the men who were in my wedding party. So we had breakfast together. We shared about Jesus. We shared a little bit of last minute marriage advice and thoughts, but we had it over at Tinga Taco. So now, and was that, oh no, like you're doing something wrong, or was it, no, it was something we got feedback on. Like, how can we make that wedding day, that wedding morning that fell on a Sunday, how can we make that special? How can we make that something where we remember and we cherish? Again, I clearly cherish it. I remember the restaurant. I remember the people that were there. And it was an opportunity for me to give gifts to people who were in my wedding. All right. Reason number 9. I need to fly through these because we got a game tonight. It's attending and or preparing a funeral service. I don't know if you've ever done this or spoken to people who've done this, but it's a beast. It's a beast to prepare a funeral service that's going to happen Sunday afternoon. That's another, again, you're preparing to honor someone's memory, to gather the family, to maybe uplift them and encourage them in one of the worst times in life when they've just lost a family member. So, a funeral. Let's go to the next one. Here's the one that sometimes we get weird about, um, and often what happens with any one of these, when I was younger, I feel like I don't know if I would have given any of this advice. Now that I'm older, I've walked a little bit with Jesus, and I go, oh, okay, like there's a lot more nuance here. So for this one, work with all your heart at a job. So there's one school of thought, and I respect this school of thought where it's like never take a job on that might have you working on a Sunday morning. So that would end up including professional athletes, or would it end up including doctors and nurses that have mandatory shifts where they have to work on Sunday mornings? However, um, with is it best to have that window open, especially if the church you're connected with and you go to, they only have that one Sunday morning service? Then yeah, I think that may be a 10. If we're going back to our rating, so yeah, it's a 10 thing. Now, if you're in a situation, again, the job you happen to be in, I remember a friend of mine who was actually a small group leader in the church. He worked every other Sunday. And I don't think he was less mature for that. I think that was kind of the obligation he had with his work situation. I know doctors are in the same thing. I know professional basketball players are in the same thing. I know professional football players are in the same thing. So it's not like it's a crazy idea, but if you understand there are circumstances and situations where people can glorify God at their job and maybe have a small special communion service a little bit later, that's good and okay too. And there are examples of people who have done that. So it's not like there aren't. So sometimes it's good for those of us who get a little dogmatic when we shouldn't be dogmatic. Is sometimes we paint stuff black and white when there's more exceptions and situations that might fall in between that black and white. Is it a sin to miss church service? I don't think so. Is it a sin to miss church service if you're working? I also don't think so. Now, often it helps people to get incorporated, to feel involved, to feel like they belong if they're going to a group consistent enough where, hey, this is their community, this is their people. That's special. That's good and special. All right, we're through 10 reasons so far. Let's go to reason number 11. Serving someone in the community. Serving someone in the community. There was an event that I was a part of. I think it was 2014, and we were asked to go. I think it was a Tuesday and a Wednesday. Again, we missed the Wednesday service to be there with some of the fatherless or some of the orphans at St. PJ's here in San Antonio, and we were asked to be speakers. My wife and we went to go speak to them in Spanish. My Spanish was horrible, but I was trying to make do. But again, so if midweek is a 10, going to speak, encourage, and build up orphans, that's not a 10. I think that's a 10. I think it's equally precious, equally valuable. It's not less than. It's not wrong. Certainly not sinful to go serve people in the community. Especially, okay, here's the thing. Like, pay attention right here. When you show up to a service and they're saying we should spend more time in the community or spend more time seeking and saving lost, spend more time helping people, it's like, well, I'm sitting in a seat here as opposed to serving in the community. So again, you got to work through. Toward the end of this video, I'll talk about how you navigate these situations with your leadership. I'm not talking about reforming and changing everything, but it's also gauging and respecting your leaders for who they are and what they do and helping them so that their work will be a joy, as Hebrews 13 says. Go study that text before you get all wild over here. Trying to cause unnecessary drama that nobody appreciates. So serving somebody in the community is a reason. Let's go to the next one. Being present with someone who's in a hardship. A friend of mine, a couple of months back, it was a Wednesday, so again, I had church service that night, on my schedule in the plan. But he got a flat tire, And then so he called the tow company or to get his car picked up and called his wife and all of these things. But it was like I was with him, and it seemed inappropriate for me to be like, "Hey, peace, brother. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to church, and I'm gonna leave you on the side of the road." It's like, no, no, no. Like, if my brother, if my boy, if my partner, if my friend is on the side of the road, then my service to God is going to be being present right here with my friend who's on the side of the road. Not extra complicated, being present. Again, you talk about, we want to get biblical, go read about when Jesus was asked, again, about that, what does it mean to, love your neighbor as yourself? When he told the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? He tells that Good Samaritan story. It's somebody who's in trouble and somebody who's showing up to help and to serve and to care for and to sacrifice and to give resources for that person. So being there for my friend, again, it was a God glorifying thing to do. What else would someone do? Let's keep going. Providing food to hungry people. I mentioned this earlier when I came to the hospital. Again, my sister was in hospital, just giving birth. It was a Sunday. We were figuring out if we were going to get the northeast service or even service over in the central. We had Norris, and my sister was still in the hospital. She was hungry, and I was like, okay, it is an opportunity for us to be able to serve her. Again, it's a good, godly thing, and it was, her son was born a couple of days prior, and I was speaking with her, well, what if I gave a lesson so her son can hear his first message about Jesus, right? Like, so her son who was just born was able to hear his first message about Jesus, and I was able to be that tool. Again, we begin to compare, is that good enough? Is that comparable to a church service? I think so. Feeding somebody who's hungry, you might have other circumstances and situations where you do that. There's churches that do the church under the bridge and they feed those that are hungry. I think this is a God glorifying thing to do. All right. Reason number 14, attending a school event for your family. One of the situations that took place, which was my sister was in a father-daughter dance. She asked if I would be in a father-daughter dance with her, but one of the practices was during that midweek time period. Again, that's that Wednesday church time period. So what do I do? Do I deny my sister? And at the time, again, my heart was, well, let me check with the leaders from the church. And the leaders of the church said, hey, go be with your sister. Like, go glorify God. Go be present with her at the school event, at that practice. So when y'all have your performance on Friday at the football game, it's a special time together. And this is the basic stuff, but sometimes we don't realize there's good, godly reasons to not be in church, but to be glorifying God in other ways. All right, next one. Experiencing a personal hardship. One of the things that happened when we were leading the small church, we would get the phone calls or the text messages, and people couldn't make church for a variety of reasons. Whether it was their house had flooded, and it's like their house had flooded. They're first-time homeowners. They don't know what to do. They're freaking out. They're trying to resolve the problem. They're trying to make it so that the damage is as minimal as possible. And was I gonna be the guy? But I know, like, you gotta, like, whatever. Gotta, you can over spiritualize it. Oh, God's gonna bless that if you come to church. Well, why don't you just go take care of that now, and we'll pray for you, and maybe they can get together with some other of the brothers and sisters later and have a nourishing time after they're all stressed out. But that does make sense. Like, yeah, you're experiencing a personal hardship. I know a couple of years back when in San Antonio, when our AC went out, we were like up all night with a technician. It was like 4, 5, 6 in the morning on a Saturday night into Sunday. And it was like, all right, I've been up all night trying to help this dude to take care of this AC situation. And then would it have been good for me to go to church? Maybe. Like I decided, hey, look, I stayed up trying to serve my household by being present with the technician to get this all resolved. So yeah, I'm gonna sleep. I've been up all night. So that's one of them. With that one, we'll go right into our next one, which is serving the night before. Some people have showed up to serve at some of the sleep in all night events that have been done, and they do like a small little service, but they miss the church service because and it kind of feeds into that overlap of that other one of because they were at another service. They were serving the whole night before, serving the teenagers, being present for them, making sure they were good and they were safe and they were okay. So again, this wasn't like, oh, how dare you? It was, of course, you're not going to make Sunday. You were serving all night Saturday, and you had your special little communion service on Saturday. All right. What about church the night before? Okay, so maybe they missed Sunday morning, but one of my friends, T, he goes to church on Saturday night. So you wouldn't see him on a Sunday. You wouldn't go, oh, like nobody would say you're immature. Nobody would say you're ungodly. Nobody would say any of these things just because he's not there on a Sunday, because he gets that time in on a Saturday night. I know all churches don't do stuff like that, but if your church does, it's another way for you to get that worship experience in on a Saturday night. Why not? Church later that night. Some churches, I know one of my friends, this point and the next point, which is 18 and 19, will go together, attending another church service time. One of the services that I went to, my friend who goes to Life Point Church, what he was telling me, they have like 5 or 6 services on Sunday. And so their leadership approach to people going is, look, we're giving y'all 5 or 6 options for church. So make one of them. You could make one of them, is their point. So why is that important? Well, you might not see him on a Sunday morning, but what if you saw him? Nobody's going to all 6 services, I don't think. Maybe they were going to a 3:30 church service. So they technically missed the morning service, but maybe they went to the afternoon service. That's another reason to miss. And that's actually expected, that you go to one, you miss all the others for that one church. And I say that citing the other church experience because I realized even with some of my audience on social media, again, there's people representing the Mormon church. Again, there's Jehovah's Witnesses, there's Baptists, there's Pentecostals, there's like 12 different categories, including atheists and non-churchgoers and independent Christian church and the ICOC and Church of Christ. So there's a wide variety of people who I rock with and who have engaged with me online, who are connected online. So there's a bunch of different experiences. So if you have a unique experience, I'm curious what your thoughts are in all this. Feel free to leave me a comment so I can circle back on that thought. All right. Reason number 20, studying for an exam. Studying for a major exam. One of my friends, he was in law school, and he was, was it the bar? Yeah, he was studying for the bar. And again, it was one of those things where it was approved and appropriate to carve out extra time, even from a midweek service, so he can study, so he could best represent God with excellence on that exam. Passed the exam, he became a lawyer, and that's fine. All right, your own mental health. This is an interesting one. It's become certainly more relevant in recent times. But I know of a situation where, again, one of the ladies, she has some of that social anxiety, so even the anxiety around crowds. So what does she do? Well, she actually shows up, but she watches the YouTube service from her car. She doesn't go inside. Now, again, is that wrong? I mean, again, she can meet with a small group of people, but the crowds provoke some anxiety. I think that's appropriate. That seems right. Not anything extra crazy. Reason number 22. Going to visit a gravesite, especially, okay, this is the advice I would especially give to people in San Antonio. It gets so hot in the afternoon. And if they're going like a Father's Day or a Mother's Day, or again, if it happened to fall on a weekend and they were going to, to connect, even whether it's a few like people, I guess in their family or even just by themselves, I would say, yeah, like go in the cool of the morning because the evening, um, the afternoon could be brutal, and then they're not even open many times in the evening. So I think that's appropriate. I would encourage them to do that. All right, mourning the death. I think the death involved. I know when my cousin passed away under very tragic circumstances. The family was together trying to resolve a few things, and I think I missed the service or whatever. And again, it was normal, appropriate, fine. People were praying for us and for me during that time, and completely okay. By the way, I'm going to give a few reasons of why not to miss church toward the end of the video, but let's keep it moving. Reason number 24. Going to a celebration. A number of people have attended a graduation from high school or from college, and the preparation begins that Sunday morning, so they miss church, and that's okay. Attended a friend's ceremony. One of my friends who I had did a bunch of Bible studies with, spent a lot of my time. We built a great friendship, great bond of brotherhood. And then, he decided he was going to be going to a different church, and then he decided he was going to go get baptized. So I was like, and he invited me to it. He told me I didn't have to, but he'd love if I was there, and I was able to go. So that meant I wouldn't be at my church; I'd be at his church for his baptism, and it seemed like a godly, appropriate thing to do. So, number 26, listening to someone struggling. I showed up to one service on a Wednesday. And one of my friends was having a difficult time outside of the church class. And instead of actually make it into the church class, I was just ended up being outside with my friend, just listening, just praying, just talking. So we never made it into the church service, but you was just listening. And the Bible says in Galatians chapter 6 to carry each other's burdens. So I was carrying somebody else's burdens. You're living out another part of the passage. I wasn't living out the part where you're hearing somebody preach God's word, but I was able to live God's word with somebody, listening to somebody who was struggling. And reason number 27, visiting a coworker in the hospital. One of my coworkers, I think she was on life support. And again, it happened to be on a Wednesday. I didn't know how long she had to live. And so I just wanted to go and pray with her, be with her, build her up during that time period. So yeah, it was at the hospital. It was years before COVID. So anyway, those are 27 reasons I can think of. Let me know if you can think of additional reasons. But before we just leave it at that, let me say a few reasons why not to miss church. When you're feeling shamed and embarrassed, sometimes you feel like you're not good enough to miss church. That's actually a great time for you to go. So God can minister. God can work through the singing. God will work through the people. You pray, and so many times we can let our thoughts condemn us, our hearts condemn us, as the scripture describes. But to actually show up, even if I feel shamed or embarrassed, I think that can be a great source of encouragement. Number 2. Sometimes you're getting, I'm strong and I don't need it. So if you're somebody where your cup is full, maybe you're the person who needs to be going to pour out for other people. Maybe it's appropriate for you to go share your strength with people who are going through it. You find people to encourage, to build up, because you're strong and you don't need to receive, but you go to give. Reason number 3. Again, these are reasons that I've talked to and through these circumstances with people. Sometimes it's like, I'm sad. I don't want to go to church until I'm happy. I don't want to be sad I don't want to go to church sad. Well, maybe going to church will help heal, help strengthen, will help fortify, help nourish. Maybe it'll do that for you. Number 4, I'm mourning, so I won't go. Now, I think I had this in both lists. It's a reason to miss church, but it's also a reason not to miss church. Why do I say that? There's a time to be away. There's time for isolation. There's times to be isolated, connecting with God, and having that time away. Now, the scripture also says in Romans chapter 12 to mourn with those who mourn. So when people are mourning, part of what happens in the body of Christ, you mourn with those who mourn, and you rejoice with those who rejoice. So there's an element of togetherness, of we meet people where they are. So you can be mourned with. And so many times in my life, healing has come my way because people grieved with me. People mourned with me. Number 5, not going to church because I'm being my authentic self. I think that's a slogan, the secular slogan that I think a follower of Jesus could look at his teaching and see that Jesus called us to deny ourselves. So I'm an agnostic for authentic self because Jesus said there's a part of our lives that are meant to be denied. We're not meant to be our authentic self. Yes, when it comes to your gifting, not when it comes to all of your preferences and desires. There's a part of us that's meant to be denied. Reason number 6, I'm running late, so I don't want to go. I've had some of the best fellowship after showing up late anyway. I showed up late. Maybe I missed the sermon, or I missed the worship, or I missed something along the way. But then they were still there for the people afterward, and the conversations were sweet. The interactions were uplifting. Souls were nourished. That's very, very precious. Reason number 7 not to miss is obsessing what people think of you. When you obsess what people think about you and you're not thinking about what God wants for you, you could get those priorities out of line. Reason number 8, time mismanagement. Sometimes, again, I talked about the studying for the exam as a reason to miss, but sometimes people, it doesn't have to do with the exam or not. Maybe somebody just wasn't using their time wisely before, so they were forced to use their time later. And that's where I would say, yeah, go and go study. And for somebody who in a situation where they mismanage their time, it's about responsibility and stewarding their time in a way that glorifies God. Let me bring this in for a landing, because when it comes to situations like this, about, hey, when is it appropriate to miss church or to go to church, to miss small group, to go to small group? I think it's appropriate to talk to your elders or talk to your staff members, to talk to your leaders, to see kind of their direction, their vision, and their heart in some of these things. There's probably 3 different buckets that I think groups might fall in. Just think about this as a framework so you can see if this might fit and help you think through which category your church might be in. So there's category number 1, which is they might be completely fine with you flexing and swapping out equally valuable activities like I described in this video. There's a benefit of that. There's flexibility, but the difficulty of that is it's very difficult to shepherd people when there's ultimate flexibility and they don't know how to, who's where the weak are to strengthen, where the wounded are to bind up, where the injured are to heal, all of these things. So there's the church that might be very flexible and they're cool with the swap. Number 2, you might have a church that's less flexible, and I'd call this, they're more about the stack. So let's illustrate. So instead of maybe you honoring your mom on a Sunday morning at breakfast instead of church, maybe they might guide you and direct you. Can you maybe plan a lunch for your mom? So stack up the activities as opposed to swap out the activities. They want you to do both as opposed to just the one, right? So you just think through what they might prefer from you. Number 3, again, so on number 2, the stack option, it's easier to shepherd to kind of know where they expect you to be and where you agreed to be or whatever. and it's easier. So it's easier for them to kind of shepherd and to guide and figure out where people are and whose needs need to be met. Number three, maybe this might be somewhat of a mix between the two. I call these people, you share the situation, you share about the circumstance, and then it's more situational. This situation, yeah, prioritize maybe stacking. This other situation, prioritize the swapping. And sometimes you can't do both, sometimes you only can do one. Now, so do all leaders share the same vision? No, they don't. That's why you work with your leaders. I'm not talking about creating some drama in your group, in your church, but figuring out what they prefer for you to do when you're in a circumstance or situation that requires you to wrestle between two God glorifying activities. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have more reasons to miss? Do you have a few parameters that you consider when you're thinking about swapping out a church service for another activity? How does your church do it? Especially if you're not a part of my church family. I'm always curious how other groups around me do that. Feel free to let me know how your church does it. Let me know what church you're a part of. I know there's at least 12 different groups and denominations represented just in the people I'm connected with online. But I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you on the next video.